My sister tossed the only thing my grandmother left me into a trash can filled with half-eaten food and laughed in my face. It was just an old yellowed piece of paper, an insurance policy from 1965 with a face value of $5,000. She told me I should learn to know my place and stop expecting handouts. But 3 hours later, when I handed that stained paper to the regional director of the insurance firm, the blood drained from his face. He locked the door, turned off the security cameras, and whispered, "Please tell me you did not show this to anyone else." Because what my sister threw away was not just a policy. It was the key to bankrupting her entire life. Before I tell you how I watched my arrogant brother-in-law get dragged out of a courtroom in handcuffs, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who was actually the wolf in disguise. I am Camille, 32 years old, and silence has always been my weapon. While my younger sister Latoya built a career on Instagram likes and filters, I spent my days in the quiet, dusty back rooms of auction houses appraising antiques. I learned early that the loudest object in the room is rarely the most valuable. My family never understood me. To my mother Shirley, I was just the boring daughter who refused to fund her lavish vacations. To Latoya, I was a prop to make her look better. And to Nana Rose, my grandmother, I was the only one who listened. The funeral was a circus. That is the only way to describe it. We were at the most prestigious funeral home in Chicago, surrounded by mahogany walls and the heavy scent of lilies, but the atmosphere was cheap. Latoya was standing right next to the open casket, holding her phone up at a 45-degree angle. She had forced a single tear down her cheek and was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "Hey guys, thank you so much for the prayers," she whispered into the phone, ignoring the line of actual mourners trying to pay their respects. "It is just so hard being the one who cared for her the most." I stood in the corner, adjusting my black dress, watching her performance. Latoya had not visited Nana Rose in 6 months. She only showed up when Nana was in a coma, just in time to take a photo of herself holding Nana's hand for content. My mother was no better. Shirley was busy greeting guests, loudly talking about how expensive the floral arrangements were, making sure everyone knew how much money she had allegedly spent. Then the doors banged open. Heads turned as Hunter Latoya's husband strutted in. He was wearing a suit that was too tight and too shiny, the kind that screams new money. He had parked a rented lime green sports car right in front of the hearse, blocking the entrance. Hunter was a crypto investor, or at least that is what his bio said. In reality, he was a man who spoke in buzzwords and lived on credit. He walked past me without even a nod, marching straight to the front row. He checked his watch, loudly sighed, and then did the unthinkable. When the pastor invited the family up to speak, Hunter grabbed the microphone before I could even take a step. "I just want to say a few words about Nana," Hunter announced, his voice booming through the speakers, making the feedback whine. Nana was a hustler. She understood the grind. Just last week, I was telling her about the new coin I launched, and I know she would have wanted everyone here to invest in their future. She would not want us to be sad. She would want us to secure the bag. A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the room. The older church members looked down at their laps in shame. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. He was using my grandmother's funeral to pitch a scam. I looked at my mother, expecting her to stop him. Instead, Shirley was nodding along, looking at Hunter with adoration. To her, Hunter was the son she never had, the successful white man who validated her social climbing. I walked up to the podium, gently took the microphone from his hand, and placed it back on the stand. I did not look at him. I did not make a scene. I simply stared at the casket and said, "Nana valued dignity above all else. Let us try to give her some." Hunter scoffed loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. He leaned over to Latoya and whispered loudly, "She is just jealous because she has zero vision." That was the tone for the rest of the day, disrespect masked as family bonding. But the real blow came 2 hours later at the lawyer's office. We sat around a long oak table. Mr. Henderson, Nana's attorney for 40 years, looked tired. He adjusted his glasses and opened the leather folder. The air in the room was thick with greed. I could see Latoya bouncing her leg under the table. Hunter was checking the price of Bitcoin on his phone. I leave my primary residence, the 4-bedroom estate in Hyde Park, to my granddaughter Latoya. Mr. Henderson read. Latoya squealed, actually squealed and clapped her hands. Yes, I knew it. I knew she loved me best. My mother reached over and hugged her. That house is worth $2 million easy. You girls are going to be set for life. I leave my jewelry collection, including the diamond brooches and the pearls, to Latoya. Mr. Henderson continued. Hunter smirked at me across the table. Looks like Nana picked her favorite Camille. Do not worry, maybe she left you her old knitting needles. I sat perfectly still. I expected this. Nana Rose had told me years ago that she had to leave the house to Latoya because if she did not, Shirley would make my life a living hell. I did not care about the house. I had my own apartment, my own career, and my own dignity. And to my granddaughter, Camille Meister. Henderson read, his voice softening slightly. I leave the contents of the shoebox located on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. He reached under the table and pulled out a battered, dusty cardboard box. It had once held winter boots. The corners were fraying. He slid it across the polished wood toward me. Latoya burst out laughing. A box. She left you a dirty old box? Oh my God, this is priceless. I opened the lid. Inside there were a few bundles of letters tied with ribbon, a dried rose, and at the very bottom, a single sheet of thick yellowed paper. It smelled of mildew and old cedar. I picked it up. It was a life insurance policy from a company called Mutual of Chicago, dated October 19, 1965. The ink was faded, but the bold print at the center was clear. Face value, $5,000. 5,000 bucks, Hunter shouted, slapping the table. That is it. That is your big inheritance. Camille, that is hilarious. That does not even cover the cost of the tires on my car. Nana really knew your worth, did she not? Latoya snatched the paper from my hand. Let me see that. She scanned it, her eyes wide with mockery. $5,000. And look at the date. This thing is ancient. It probably expired before I was born. You know what, Camille? Since I got the house and the diamonds, I will do you a favor. She crumpled the paper. I watched in slow motion as her manicured fingers crushed the 60-year-old document into a ball. I will save you the embarrassment of trying to cash a check for chump change, she said, and tossed the paper ball into the trash can in the corner of the room. It landed right on top of a half-empty styrofoam cup of coffee. Trash belongs with trash, Hunter said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Come on, babe. Let us go celebrate. Drinks are on me. Well, actually, drinks are on Nana. My mother stood up too, looking at me with pity. Don't be mad, Camille. Nana just knew Latoya needed the help more than you. You are independent. You can handle yourself. They walked out of the office, leaving me alone with Mr. Henderson. The door clicked shut and the silence returned. I looked at the trash can. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He looked back at me, his eyes full of sympathy. I am sorry, Camille, he said. I tried to tell her to update the will, but she was stubborn. It is okay, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice steady. I stood up and walked over to the trash can. I reached in, careful not to touch the coffee spill, and retrieved the crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the table. My heart was pounding, but not from anger. It was pounding because of what I had seen when Latoya held it up. I am an appraiser. I know paper. I know ink. And I know that in 1965, Mutual of Chicago was not just an insurance company. It was a Black-owned cooperative that issued policies tied to equity ownership for their founding members. I looked closely in the bottom corner of the document. There, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a red wax seal and the words, Class A, Participating Shareholder. Infinite Dividend Accumulation. Latoya saw $5,000. I saw a ticking time bomb. I carefully folded the paper and put it in my purse. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I think I need to make a trip to the insurance office." I walked out of the building. My family was already gone, probably popping champagne bottles in a VIP section somewhere, charging it to credit cards they thought they could pay off with the inheritance. They had no idea that they had just thrown away the only lifeline that could save them from the storm that was coming. And I was going to make sure that when the rain started, they would get soaked. Latoya snatched the paper from my hand with a speed that surprised even me. Her manicured nails dug into the fragile edges of the document. The sound of the 60-year-old paper crinkling echoed in the silent conference room like a bone snapping. "Let me help you with that, Camille," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You have always been a hoarder just like Nana, holding on to useless things because you are too afraid to let go. But I am doing you a favor. Really, I am." She squeezed her hand into a fist, crushing my inheritance into a tight, jagged ball. She walked over to the metal wastebasket in the corner of the room. It was overflowing with the remains of the lawyer's lunch. There were grease-stained wrappers, a half-eaten bagel with cream cheese, and a styrofoam cup leaking cold coffee. Latoya held her hand over the trash can, looking me dead in the eye. She smiled the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes and dropped the paper. It landed right in the middle of the mess, instantly soaking up a brown stain from the coffee dregs. "Oops," she giggled. "Well, looks like it is where it belongs now." Trash with trash. Hunter clapped his hands together, checking his reflection in the window. "All right, show is over. Let us get out of here. I made reservations at the Capitol Grill for 5:30. I heard they have a Wagyu steak that costs more than Camille makes in a month. We need to celebrate properly. Latoya, babe, you are officially a property owner." My mother Shirley stood up and smoothed out her dress. She picked up her purse, avoiding my gaze for a second, before turning to me with that familiar look of disappointment. "Camille, we are going to dinner to celebrate your sister's good fortune," she said. "Obviously, we did not reserve a seat for you. It is a family celebration, and you seem to be in a mood today. Besides, looking at what Nana left you, I do not think you can afford to split the bill with us." She reached out and patted my cheek, a gesture that felt more like a slap. "Maybe you can stay here and help Mr. Henderson clean up," Shirley added. "You were always good at cleaning up messes. We will bring you a doggy bag if there are any leftovers." Hunter laughed as he held the door open for them. "Don't count on it, Shirley. I am starving. See you later, Camille. Try not to spend that $5,000 all in one place. Maybe buy yourself a personality." They swept out of the room in a cloud of expensive perfume and arrogance. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing out their noise. The silence that followed was heavy, but for the first time all day it felt peaceful. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, was busy organizing files at his desk. He looked up at me over his glasses, his expression apologetic. "I can have my secretary retrieve that for you, Camille," he said softly. "You do not have to do that." I shook my head slowly. "No, Mr. Henderson. I will do it. They think this is trash. But in my line of work, I have learned that one man's trash is often the history that another man forgot to value." I walked over to the wastebasket. The smell of cold coffee and onion cream cheese wafted up. It was humiliating. It was degrading. But I did not hesitate. I reached my hand into the bin, ignoring the grease that brushed against my wrist. My fingers closed around the damp, crumpled ball of paper. I pulled it out and walked over to the large conference table. I laid the paper down on the polished wood. The coffee stain was spreading across the bottom right corner, threatening to obscure the text. I opened my purse. I did not carry makeup or hairspray like Latoya. I carried the tools of my trade. I took out a small microfiber cloth, a pair of tweezers, and my jeweler's loupe, a high-powered magnifying glass that I used for appraising antiques. I worked in silence. First, I used the cloth to gently blot the moisture from the paper, careful not to rub or tear the fibers. The paper was high-quality bond made of cotton and linen. They do not make paper like this anymore. It had a texture to it, a weight that whispered of authority. As I smoothed out the creases Latoya had made, I felt a strange texture under my thumb. It was raised ink. This was not a standard printed copy. This was an original issuance. I lifted the jeweler's loupe to my eye and leaned down. The world narrowed to a circle of illuminated clarity. I ignored the large block letters that said $5,000. That was just the distraction. That was the surface-level value for the tourists. I was looking for the provenance. I scanned the bottom of the document past the signatures of the witness and the agent. And there, hidden beneath the ornate border design, was a small red wax seal. It was cracked slightly from Latoya's grip, but it was still intact. I adjusted the focus on my loupe. Through the glass, the tiny embossed letters within the seal sprang into sharp relief. Series 1 founding member. My breath caught in my throat. I moved the loupe to the fine print on the back of the document, the section that looked like generic legal disclaimers. The text was microscopic, designed to be ignored by impatient people like Hunter and Latoya. I read the clause labeled Section 4C. The holder of this policy is designated as a Class A preferred shareholder in the Mutual of Chicago Cooperative. Dividends shall be reinvested automatically into the purchase of additional equity shares at the original 1965 strike price. This clause is irrevocable and transferable only by direct inheritance. I pulled back from the loupe. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what I had just read. Nana Rose had not bought a simple life insurance policy. In 1965, Black people could not easily buy stocks on the open market. So, community-owned insurance companies offered a workaround. They sold policies that were actually equity stakes in disguise. Nana had bought stock in the company itself, and she had checked the box for automatic reinvestment. I did the mental math. For 60 years, every cent of dividend this policy earned had been used to buy more stock at 1965 prices. The company had split, merged and grown into a financial empire. And this piece of paper, this trash that my sister had thrown into a pile of garbage, was the receipt for all of it. I looked at the coffee stain. It had stopped just millimeters from the validation code. I picked up the paper, holding it with the reverence it deserved. It was no longer just a document. It was a weapon. A weapon forged by my grandmother's foresight and sharpened by my family's greed. Latoya thought she had thrown away $5,000. She had actually thrown away the power to control the board of directors of the bank that held her mortgage. I carefully placed the document into a protective plastic sleeve from my bag. I snapped my purse shut. The click sounded like the hammer of a gun being cocked. I looked at the empty chairs where my family had sat laughing at me just minutes ago. I imagined them at the steakhouse ordering expensive wine on credit cards that were about to be declined. "Enjoy your dinner, Latoya," I whispered to the empty room, "because it is the last meal you are going to enjoy for a very long time." I turned to the lawyer who was watching me with curiosity. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice calm and icy, "I need the address of the Mutual of Chicago Regional Headquarters. And I need you to notarize an affidavit stating that my sister voluntarily discarded this specific item in your presence." Mr. Henderson paused, then a slow smile spread across his face. He pulled a fresh stamp out of his drawer. "I would be happy to, Camille. I would be very happy to." I walked out of that office and into the cool Chicago evening. The city lights were flickering on. Somewhere out there, my family was toasting to their own destruction, and I was the only one who knew the storm had already made landfall. The headquarters of Mutual of Chicago rose out of the pavement like a spear of blue glass piercing the sky. It was 40 stories of intimidation, designed to make ordinary people feel small. I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the glare of the afternoon sun reflecting off the windows. My sister Latoya would have stopped here to take a selfie, posing with a peace sign to pretend she had a meeting with a high-power executive. Hunter would have walked in with his chest puffed out, loud and arrogant, trying to mask his insecurity with noise. But I just adjusted my bag, checked my reflection in the revolving door, and walked in with the silence of a storm that had not yet broken. The lobby smelled of money. It was a specific scent, a mix of polished marble, expensive HVAC filters, and the faint ozone of high-frequency trading. I walked straight to the front reception desk. Behind the granite counter sat a woman whose name tag read Brenda. She had the kind of haircut that suggested she asked to speak to the manager at least 3 times a week. She was typing furiously, ignoring me completely. I waited for 10 seconds. Then I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said softly. Brenda stopped typing but did not look up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I do not. I am here to redeem a policy." She finally looked up, her eyes scanning my outfit. I was wearing a simple black blazer and slacks, professional but not flashy. In her eyes, I was nobody. "Claims department is on the second floor," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward the elevators without making eye contact. "Take a number and wait. The current wait time is about 90 minutes. I did not move. "This is not a standard claim," I said, placing the plastic sleeve containing the document on the counter. "I need to speak to someone in the Heritage Assets division." Brenda looked at the yellowed paper inside the plastic. She saw the coffee stain on the corner. She saw the creases where Latoya had crushed it. A scoff escaped her lips. "Ma'am, we do not accept damaged documents," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "And we certainly do not process paperwork that looks like it was fished out of a dumpster. If you want to file a claim for a deceased relative, you need to go to our website, download the PDF, and mail it in. Please step aside, you are blocking the line for serious clients." There was no line behind me. I leaned in closer. My voice dropped an octave, becoming very still and very cold. "I suggest you type the policy number into your terminal, Brenda. Just the number. If the system tells you to send me away, I will leave. But if you refuse to do your job because you do not like the look of my paper, I will make sure your supervisor knows exactly why a founding member was turned away from the lobby." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Fine. Whatever. Read it to me." I read the alphanumeric code from the top right corner of the document. A 1007 alpha. She typed it in with aggressive stabbing motions, clearly ready to tell me the number was invalid. She hit the enter key with a flourish. I watched her face. First, her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. Then the color drained from her cheeks. The reflection of her monitor showed a flashing red light. A low, rhythmic beeping sound started coming from her computer, distinct from the ambient noise of the lobby. It was not an error sound. It was an alert. Her screen had locked. "What is going on?" she whispered, tapping the keys. "It is frozen. I cannot exit." Suddenly, the elevators behind the security turnstiles chimed. Not just one, but 3 of them. Security guards in dark suits stepped out, but they were not looking at me with suspicion. They were flanking a man who was practically sprinting across the marble floor. He was tall, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my car. His hair was silver and his face was pale, glistening with a thin sheen of sweat. I recognized him from the business magazines. It was Mr. Sterling, the regional director of the entire Midwest division. He ran past the turnstiles, ignoring the security protocols. Brenda stood up, looking relieved. "Mr. Sterling," she called out, "I am so sorry. This woman was trying to use a fake code and she crashed my system. I was just about to call security to have her removed." Mr. Sterling ignored her. He did not even look at her. He stopped directly in front of me, breathing hard. He looked at the plastic sleeve on the counter, then up at my face. He looked terrified. "Ms. Carter?" he asked, his voice breathless. "Ms. Camille Carter." I nodded once. "Yes." Mr. Sterling let out a long exhale like a man who had just defused a bomb. He turned to Brenda, who was staring with her mouth open. "Unlock the turnstile, Brenda, now, and put the system in override mode." "But sir," she stammered, "the machine says it is a code red legacy alert." "I know what it says," Sterling snapped, losing his composure for a second. "Open the gate." The gate clicked open. Mr. Sterling gestured for me to follow him, his hand trembling slightly. Please, Mrs. Carter. Come with me. We have a private suite prepared. I apologize for the reception. Our front desk staff is not trained to handle Class A shareholders. I retrieved my document from the counter. As I walked past Brenda, I paused. She looked like she was about to be sick. You were right about one thing, Brenda, I said calmly. It was fished out of a dumpster. You should be careful what you throw away. I followed Mr. Sterling to the private elevator. He used a key card to select the top floor. The ride up was silent, but the tension radiating off him was loud. He kept wringing his hands. When the doors opened, we stepped into a different world. The penthouse suite was lined with mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that only extreme wealth can buy. He led me to a leather armchair and poured me a glass of sparkling water. His hands were shaking so much that a little water spilled on the coaster. Ms. Carter, he began sitting opposite me. I need you to understand something. When that policy number was entered, it triggered an automated alert to the board of directors in New York. You see, your grandmother, Mrs. Rose, was one of the original 10 investors who provided the seed capital for this company in 1965. I nodded. I read the fine print, Mr. Sterling. Infinite dividend accumulation. He swallowed hard. Exactly. Back then, because black investors were barred from traditional stock markets, the founders created a closed-loop system. They wanted to build generational wealth. They tied the insurance policies to equity. But they never expected anyone to hold on to the paper for 60 years without cashing out. They assumed the families would sell early. He pulled a file from his briefcase. He opened it, revealing a spreadsheet full of complex calculations. The company has split its stock 5 times since 1965. We have acquired 3 banks and 2 other insurance firms. Because your grandmother checked the reinvestment box, every single dividend, every payout, every merger bonus was used to buy more stock. He pushed the paper toward me. He looked like he was in physical pain. Your sister, I believe, threw this away, he asked. Yes, I said. She thought it was worth $5,000. Mr. Sterling let out a dry, hysterical chuckle. 5,000. If only. Ms. Carter, as of the market close yesterday, the value of the shares attached to this policy is $8,450,000. I looked at the number on the page. It was real, the zero stretched out like a lifeline. But that is not why I ran down to the lobby. Sterling continued leaning forward. His eyes were pleading. That is just the cash value. The real issue is the voting rights. As a Class A shareholder, you technically own a controlling interest in this specific branch. You have the power to audit our loan books. You have the power to veto regional decisions. He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Ms. Carter, I am going to be honest with you. If you liquidate this entire account today, you will drain the liquidity of this branch. We would have to freeze operations for 48 hours. It would cause a panic. The press would have a field day. He looked at me with desperation. He was a powerful man, a man who controlled the financial fate of thousands, and he was begging me. Please, he whispered, do not cash it all out today. We can set up a structured payment plan. We can give you an unlimited line of credit instantly. We will give you the Emperor tier account status. Just please do not bankrupt my branch on a Tuesday afternoon. I sat back in the leather chair taking a sip of the water. I thought about Latoya, who was probably right now trying to buy a designer handbag on a maxed-out credit card. I thought about Hunter yelling at the funeral. I thought about my mother telling me I was selfish. I looked at Mr. Sterling. I will not bankrupt you today, Mr. Sterling, I said. On one condition, anything he said quickly. Name it. I want access to the internal loan database of your subsidiary banks, I said. Specifically, any loans taken out under the names Latoya Carter or Hunter Miller. Sterling hesitated. That is highly irregular. Privacy laws are strict. I tapped the yellowed document. I am a Class A shareholder with audit rights. Am I not? I am just exercising my right to inspect the quality of the bank's assets. I have reason to believe there are fraudulent loans on your books. Sterling looked at the paper, then back at me. He nodded slowly. I will have the files brought up immediately. I smiled for the first time that day. It was not a nice smile. Good. And Mr. Sterling, keep the line of credit open. I have a feeling I am going to need to buy some real estate very soon. Specifically, a house in Hyde Park that is about to go into foreclosure. While Mr. Sterling was trembling in his high-rise office, trying to figure out how to keep his branch solvent, a very different kind of panic was erupting across town. I did not witness this part personally, but between the neighbors' police reports and the frantic voicemails Latoya left me later, I can paint the picture with perfect clarity. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales. At the exact moment I realized I was a multimillionaire, my brother-in-law Hunter was watching his entire existence evaporate into thin air. Hunter was sitting in his man cave, a room in the basement of the house Latoya had just inherited. He had spent $10,000 renovating it before the ink on the deed was even dry. He had 6 monitors set up glowing with the jagged green and red lines of cryptocurrency charts. He called it his command center. He liked to tell people he was a day trader, a market disruptor, a visionary. But as he stared at the center screen, vision was the last thing he had. He was staring at a catastrophe. The coin he had bet everything on, a speculative token called Moon Rocket, had just done what they call a rug pull. 1 minute the line on the graph was climbing toward the heavens, promising enough wealth to buy a fleet of Lamborghinis. The next minute, the line dropped straight down like a stone thrown off a cliff. Hunter refreshed the page. The value was 0. He refreshed it again. 0. He checked his digital wallet balance. It had been showing $600,000 just an hour ago. Now it showed $4.32. No, Hunter whispered, the sound escaping his throat like a strangled animal. No, no, no. This is a glitch. This has to be a glitch. He started typing furiously, logging into forums, checking Discord channels. The messages were flying by so fast, he could barely read them. Scam. We got played. Developers drained the liquidity pool. It is over. Hunter stood up so fast, his ergonomic chair flew backward and crashed into the wall. He grabbed the nearest object, a signed basketball in a glass case, and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered against the 60-inch television, sending a spiderweb of cracks through the screen. Latoya ran down the stairs, still wearing her funeral dress. Hunter, what is going on? I heard a crash. Hunter was pacing the room, pulling at his hair. His face was a mask of sweat and terror. He looked at his wife, but he did not see her. He saw the debt collectors. He saw the loan sharks. He saw the end of his fake life. It is gone, Toya, he screamed. It is all gone. The liquidity pool dried up. They took it all. Latoya looked confused. What are you talking about? What is gone? Just the crypto money. That is okay, baby. We still have the house. We have the inheritance money. We are fine. Hunter stopped pacing. He looked at her with wild, bloodshot eyes. The arrogance that usually defined him was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly fear of a man who knows he has dug his own grave. We do not have the house, Latoya, he said, his voice trembling. What do you mean? Latoya asked, her voice rising in pitch. Nana left it to me. It is in my name. Hunter sank to his knees on the plush carpet. He put his head in his hands. I needed leverage, Toya. You do not understand how these markets work. You need capital to make capital. I forged your signature on a home equity line of credit last week. I took out a hard money loan against the deed. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the computer servers still displaying the flat line of their future. You did what Latoya whispered. I borrowed $500,000. Hunter confessed, his voice muffled by his hands. I put it all into Moon Rocket. I was going to double it by tonight. We were going to be rich. I was going to pay off the loan before you even knew it existed. Latoya stared at him. Her face, usually composed for the camera, crumbled. You gambled my house, my inheritance. It gets worse, Hunter said, looking up. I borrowed it from private lenders. Not a bank. These are not people who send polite letters when you miss a payment. As if on cue, Hunter's phone buzzed on the desk. It vibrated aggressively against the mahogany surface. The caller ID said, "Unknown number." Hunter stared at the phone like it was a rattlesnake. He did not answer it. It stopped ringing. Then a text message appeared on the lock screen. "We saw the charts, Hunter. Tough break. You have 48 hours to return the principal plus 20% interest. Or we take the house, and maybe a few fingers to remind you not to play games." Hunter read the message out loud. Latoya screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that surely reached the neighbors. She collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. "We are homeless," she wailed. "We are going to be on the street. My friends will see. My followers will see. Oh my God, Hunter, you ruined everything." Just then, my mother Shirley walked down the stairs. She was holding a glass of wine, oblivious to the chaos, until she saw the shattered TV and her daughter on the floor. "What on earth is happening down here?" Shirley demanded. "You two are making enough noise to wake the dead. Nana Rose is probably rolling in her grave. He lost it all, Mom." Latoya screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her husband. "He gambled the house. He forged my signature. We owe $500,000 by Thursday, or they are going to kill him and take the house." Shirley froze. She looked at Hunter, who was still on his knees, weeping. Then she looked at Latoya. For a second, I think she actually considered the reality of the situation. She considered that her golden son-in-law was a fraud. She considered that they were in serious trouble. But people like Shirley do not process reality. They process blame, and they look for bailouts. She took a long sip of her wine, her eyes narrowing as the gears in her head turned. She did not yell at Hunter. She did not comfort Latoya. She simply pivoted to the only strategy she knew: survival at someone else's expense. "Stop crying," Latoya Shirley snapped. "It ruins your makeup. And get up, Hunter. You look pathetic. We are not going to lose this house." "How?" Hunter choked out. "We need 500 grand in 2 days." Shirley swirled the wine in her glass, staring at the dark red liquid. A cruel little smile played on her lips. "We have a backup plan," she said calmly. "We have Camille." Latoya looked up, wiping mascara from her cheeks. "Camille, Mom, she has nothing. We just laughed at her $5,000 inheritance today. She lives in a rental. She drives a Honda." "That is what she wants you to think," Shirley said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But think about it. She has been working that appraisal job for 10 years. She never goes on vacation. She never buys nice clothes. She has no husband, no kids. She just hoards her money." Shirley walked over to the desk and picked up a framed photo of the family. It was from a Christmas party 3 years ago. I was in the back, barely visible. I saw a bank statement on her counter once when I went to use her bathroom. Shirley lied. I do not know if she saw it, but the balance was significant. And she has a retirement fund. She has good credit. "But will she give it to us?" Latoya asked. She seemed pretty mad at the funeral. "She is your sister," Shirley said dismissively. "She is family. She talks tough, but deep down she wants to belong. She craves my approval. If we go to her, all of us, and tell her it is a life-or-death situation, she will cave. She always caves." Hunter stood up, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Hope was creeping back into his eyes. A desperate, pathetic kind of hope. "We can tell her it is for the baby," Hunter said. Latoya looked at him. "I am not pregnant, Hunter." "Not yet," Hunter said quickly. "But she does not know that. We tell her you are pregnant. We tell her the stress is going to cause a miscarriage. We guilt her. We break her down. She cannot say no to an unborn niece or nephew." Shirley nodded approvingly. "That is smart. See, I knew you were a thinker, Hunter." Latoya stood up. She looked at her husband, the liar and the thief. Then she looked at her mother, the manipulator. And instead of running away, she joined them. "Okay," Latoya said, smoothing her dress. "Let us go to her apartment. But we need to do it now, before she spends that $5,000 on something stupid." They gathered their keys and their coats. They marched out of the basement, leaving the shattered glass and the dead monitors behind. They were on a mission. They were going to harvest the family scapegoat one last time. They had no idea that while they were plotting to steal my savings, I was sitting in a penthouse suite overlooking the city, drinking sparkling water, and reading a file that contained every dirty financial secret they had ever tried to hide. They were coming to hunt a rabbit, but they were about to walk into the den of a lioness. And this lioness was done eating scraps. The silence in my apartment was usually my favorite thing about coming home. It was a modest one-bedroom unit on the north side, far away from the overpriced gated communities where my sister Latoya lived. My furniture was second-hand restored by my own hands, and my walls were lined with books and antique maps. It was a sanctuary of peace. But that evening the peace was shattered not by a phone call, but by a fist pounding against my front door. I was sitting at my small kitchen table. In front of me sat a porcelain cup of Earl Grey tea steaming gently. Next to the tea face down on the polished wood was a cashier's check from the Mutual of Chicago Bank. I had deposited the insurance policy earlier that afternoon. The bank had given me a temporary line of credit and this check as a good faith advance while they processed the full $8 million. The amount written on the paper facing the table was $500,000. I knew who was at the door before I even stood up. I could hear my mother's voice through the wood, shrill and demanding. "Open up, Camille! We know you are in there! We saw your car!" I took a slow sip of tea. I let them pound for another 10 seconds. It was a small, petty act of control, but after 32 years of being summoned like a servant, I enjoyed making them wait. When I finally unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, I did not even get the chance to say hello. My mother Shirley pushed past me like a woman escaping a fire. She was followed by Latoya, whose mascara was running down her cheeks, and Hunter, who looked like he had aged 10 years since the funeral this morning. They marched into my living room, bringing the chaotic energy of desperation with them. Shirley looked around my apartment with her usual disdain, curling her lip at my vintage velvet sofa. "It smells like old paper in here," she muttered, before turning on me with a look of frantic intensity. "Sit down, Camille. We have a family emergency." I did not sit. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You have a key," I said calmly. "Oh wait, no, you do not. Because I changed the locks last year when you let yourself in to borrow my vacuum cleaner and never returned it." "What do you want, Shirley?" "Do not use that tone with me," Shirley snapped. "Your sister is in crisis. Hunter has been the victim of a sophisticated financial crime." I looked at Hunter. He was pacing back and forth on my rug, wringing his hands. He refused to meet my eyes. "A financial crime," I repeated. "You mean the crypto market crashed?" Hunter stopped pacing. His head snapped up. "How did you know I read the news, Hunter? And I know you leveraged the house. I can see the panic radiating off you." Latoya let out a sob and collapsed onto my sofa. "They are going to take the house, Camille. They gave us 48 hours. We have nowhere to go. Nana's house. My house. It is going to be gone." Shirley stepped forward, invading my personal space. She placed her hands on my shoulders, her grip tight and painful. She put on her best maternal face, the one she used right before she asked for money. "Camille, listen to me. I know we have had our differences. I know you felt slighted at the funeral, but that is in the past. We are family, and family protects each other." I looked at her hands on my shoulders. I felt nothing. No warmth, no love. Just the weight of obligation she had been piling on me since I was 16 and got my first paycheck. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "We need money," Shirley said, cutting straight to the chase. "We need $500,000. Hunter says he can pay it back in a month once the market corrects itself. But right now we need cash to stop the lenders." I let out a dry laugh. 500,000. You think I have $500,000 lying around in my sofa cushions? I am an appraiser, mother, not a hedge fund manager. Shirley's eyes narrowed. She dropped her hands and stepped back. "Do not lie to me, Camille. I know you have savings. You have been working since you were 22 and you never spend a dime. You have that retirement account. You have equity in this quaint little apartment." "I rent this apartment," I corrected her. "Then take out a loan." Shirley shouted, her voice rising to a scream. Go to the bank. You have perfect credit. We checked. You checked my credit? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Hunter stepped in, trying to regain some masculine authority, though his voice was shaking. We just did a background check, Camille. It is standard. Look, your credit score is over 800. You can get a signature loan, or you can cash out your 401k. We did the math. If you liquidate everything, you can cover about 300,000. We can beg for the rest. I stared at them. They had not just come to ask for help. They had come with a financial audit of my life. They had calculated exactly how much of my existence they could harvest to cover their mistakes. And why would I do that? I walked over to the kitchen table and sat down next to my tea. I placed my hand over the face down, check, feeling the cool paper under my palm. Why would I bankrupt my future to pay for Hunter's gambling addiction? Because it is your sister, Shirley yelled. Because she is pregnant? I looked at Latoya. She looked down at her lap, unable to hold my gaze. She is not pregnant, I said. I saw her drinking champagne at the lawyer's office 3 hours ago. She didn't know then. Hunter lied, his face turning red. She just took a test. Stop it, I said. Just stop lying. For once in your lives, just own your mess. You threw away my inheritance this morning. You laughed at me. You told me I was worthless. And now you want me to save you. Shirley marched over to the table. She slammed her hand down, rattling my teacup. That was a joke, Camille. We were grieving. You are so sensitive. You always have been. You hold on to grudges like a dog with a bone. This is about life and death. If Hunter does not pay these people, they are going to hurt him. Do you want your brother-in-law's blood on your hands? I looked up at my mother. I looked at the woman who had criticized my hair, my career, and my life choices every single day for 3 decades. It is not my debt, I said softly. And he is not my husband. Shirley's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. Her lips pulled back in a snarl. You selfish, ungrateful little brat. I gave you life. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me, by watching your family burn while you sit here drinking tea. She raised her hand. I saw it coming, but I did not flinch. I did not block it. The slap echoed through the small apartment. It was a hard, stinging blow to my left cheek. My head whipped to the side. The room went silent. Latoya gasped. Hunter froze. I slowly turned my head back to face my mother. My cheek was burning, but my heart was ice cold. I tasted a tiny bit of copper in my mouth. I picked up my napkin and dabbed my lip. I stood up. I am tall, taller than my mother, and for the first time I used every inch of my height. I looked down at her. Get out, I said. Shirley looked at her hand, then at me. She seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but her pride would not let her back down. I am not leaving until you write a check, she spat. I picked up the check that was face down on the table. I held it in my hand. You want a check? I asked. Hunter's eyes widened. He saw the bank logo on the back. Yes, Camille, please. Just help us. I flipped the check over. I held it up so they could see the amount. $500,000, payable to Camille Carter. They stared at it. Their mouths dropped open. Oh my God, Latoya whispered. You have it. You actually have it. Give it to us, Camille. Please. That saves everything. I looked at the check. Then I looked at them. This check, I said, my voice steady and calm, is the first installment of the inheritance you threw in the trash. It is mine. Every single penny. I ripped the check in half. Then I ripped it again. And again. I let the confetti of blue and white paper rain down onto the floor at Shirley's feet. You can tape it back together if you want, I said. But it is void. Just like my relationship with you. Shirley stared at the pieces of paper on the floor, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Get out of my house, I said. If you are not gone in 30 seconds, I am calling the police. And since I now have the direct number to the district attorney thanks to my new financial status, I do not think they will be lenient with trespassers. Hunter grabbed Shirley's arm. Come on, Shirley. She is crazy. She is actually crazy. Let us go. They backed away from me. Shirley looked at me one last time, her eyes full of hate. You will die alone, Camille, she hissed. You will die alone with your money. Better alone than with you, I replied. I slammed the door in their faces. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain into place. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My cheek was throbbing. But as I listened to their footsteps retreating down the hallway, arguing with each other, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt free. I walked back to the table, sat down, and finished my tea. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. I need a new check, I said when he answered. And Mr. Sterling, go ahead and initiate that audit on Hunter's loans. I think you are going to find some very interesting forgeries. The drive back from Camille's apartment was the longest 40 minutes of my life, or at least that is what LaToya told me later. I was not in the car, of course. I was busy shredding the rest of the check and ordering a new security system. But I can imagine the atmosphere inside that leased Range Rover perfectly. It was the suffocating silence of two people who had just realized their safety net had been cut. Hunter was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, driving with the aggressive recklessness of a man who feels the walls closing in. LaToya was staring out the window, watching the city pass by, wondering how she went from being the heiress of a $2 million estate to a woman who might be sleeping in her car by the weekend. They arrived back at the mansion that Nana Rose had left to LaToya. It was a beautiful house, a sprawling brick estate in Hyde Park, with ivy climbing the walls and a manicured lawn. But now it did not look like a home. It looked like a liability. It looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. Hunter walked straight to the liquor cabinet in the living room. He bypassed the expensive crystal glasses and drank straight from the bottle of bourbon. The burn in his throat was the only thing distracting him from the impending doom of the loan sharks. He checked his phone. No messages from the lenders yet, but he knew they were coming. He had less than 36 hours left. Then his phone buzzed. Hunter flinched, nearly dropping the bottle. He looked at the screen expecting a threat or a demand for payment. But the name on the screen was not a criminal. It was frantic. It was Jason. Jason was Hunter's old fraternity brother who worked as a senior account manager at First National Bank. He was the kind of guy who bent the rules for friends, the guy who had tipped Hunter off to risky investments in the past. Hunter hesitated, then answered. What do you want? Jason Hunter snapped. Unless you are calling to tell me you can approve a $500,000 loan with zero collateral, I am not in the mood. Hunter, shut up and listen to me, Jason whispered. His voice was urgent, hushed, like he was huddled in a bathroom stall or a supply closet. I could lose my job for making this call. Every keystroke I make is logged. But I had to tell you. Tell me what Hunter asked, leaning against the kitchen island. You know how you asked me to keep an eye on your family accounts, just in case any transfers came through from the estate settlement? Yeah, Hunter said. So what? The account is empty, Jason. We know that. Not your account, Jason hissed. I am talking about the extended family network. My system just threw up a massive flag. A code diamond alert. Hunter frowned. What is a code diamond? It means a high net worth individual just entered the system within your immediate circle, Jason explained. It usually happens when someone wins the lottery or sells a major company. I got a notification because her social security number was linked to yours on that old joint application you guys made years ago. Whose social security number? Hunter asked, his patience wearing thin. Camille Carter, Jason said. Your sister-in-law. Hunter froze. He set the bottle down on the counter. Camille. What about her? She makes 60 grand a year appraising old chairs. Not anymore, Jason said. Hunter, are you sitting down? The system just updated her status. She opened a holding account with the Mutual of Chicago Trust this afternoon. The pending balance transfer is $8.4 million. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Hunter felt the blood drain from his face. He felt dizzy. He gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "Did you say million?" Hunter whispered. 8.4, Jason confirmed. "And it is fully liquid. It is backed by Class A preferred stock. She is not just rich, Hunter. She is VIP status. She has a higher credit limit than the mayor." "Look, I have to go. If compliance catches me on this line, I am dead. I just thought you should know that your broke sister-in-law is currently the richest person in your zip code." The line went dead. Hunter stood there staring at the phone. His brain was trying to process the information, trying to rewrite the reality he thought he knew. $8 million. Camille. Suddenly, the image flashed in his mind. The lawyer's office, the shoebox, the yellowed paper, Mutual of Chicago. That was the name on the check Camille had showed them. That was the name Jason just said. And then, the memory hit him like a physical blow. He saw LaToya crumpling the paper. He saw her tossing it into the trash can. He heard his own voice laughing. "Trash belongs with trash." A scream built up in Hunter's chest, a primal sound of rage and regret. He dropped the phone on the counter and ran into the living room where LaToya was crying on the sofa. "LaToya!" he roared. LaToya jumped, looking up with wide, tear-filled eyes. What is it? Are they here? Are the lenders here?" Hunter grabbed her by the shoulders and hauled her up from the couch. He was shaking, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "The paper, Toya. The paper in the box. The one you threw away." LaToya looked confused. "The insurance policy? The $5,000 thing? What about it?" "It was not $5,000. Hunter screamed, shaking her. "It was 8 million. LaToya stared at him. She blinked. "What? Jason just called me Hunter," said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Camille just deposited $8.4 million into a Mutual of Chicago account. That paper was not an insurance policy. It was stock. It was a winning lottery ticket from 1965, and we threw it in the garbage." LaToya's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed back onto the cushions. 8 million, she whispered. Hunter began to pace the room, his mind racing, twisting the facts to fit his narrative. He could not accept that he was the idiot who encouraged her to throw it away. He could not accept that he was the failure. He needed a villain. And there was only one candidate. She knew, Hunter said. He stopped pacing and looked at LaToya. His eyes were narrowing. She knew Toya. LaToya looked up. "Who?" Camille, Hunter shouted. "Think about it. Why did she stay behind? Why didn't she come to dinner? She is an appraiser." "LaToya, that is her job. She looks at old paper all day long. She took one look at that document and she knew exactly what it was worth." "But she let me throw it away," LaToya stammered. "Exactly," Hunter said, pointing a finger at her. "That was her plan. She played you. She stood there and watched you crumble it up. She wanted you to throw it away so she could fish it out of the trash and claim it for herself." He walked over and knelt in front of LaToya, taking her hands. He adopted the tone of a protective husband, the manipulator shifting into high gear. "She stole from you, baby. That box was part of the estate. Nana left everything to you. The house, the jewelry. That box was supposed to be trash. If it was worth $8 million, Nana would have given it to you. You were her favorite. Everyone knows that." LaToya's expression began to change. The shock was fading, replaced by a slow, burning indignation. The logic was twisted, but it was comforting. It relieved her of the guilt of her own stupidity and replaced it with anger at her sister. "She tricked me," LaToya whispered. "She watched me throw it away and she laughed at me. She sat in that apartment today and humiliated us," Hunter said, fueling the fire. "She ripped up that check in front of our faces. That was your money, Toya. That was our house. That was our future. She stole it. She stole your birthright and now she is letting us starve. Latoya stood up. Her tears were gone. Her face was hard. That bitch, she said. That jealous, manipulative bitch. She thinks she is so smart. She thinks she can just take what belongs to this family. Hunter stood up with her. He saw the shift. He had successfully turned the narrative. They were no longer the villains who tried to mooch off their sister. They were the victims of a grand heist. We are not going to let her keep it, Hunter said. It is legally ours. It is marital assets. It is family trust property. She stole it from a trash can that belonged to the estate. That is theft. What do we do? Latoya asked. Hunter smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. We get it back, he said. We act like everything is fine. We pretend we are sorry. We get close to her, and then we take what is ours. But first we need to find out where she is keeping the physical document. The bank needs the original paper to finalize the transfer. If we get that paper, we get the money. Latoya nodded. She walked over to the mirror and wiped the mascara from under her eyes. She fixed her hair. She looked like a soldier preparing for war. She wants to play games, Latoya said to her reflection. Fine. Let us see who wins when the gloves come off. Hunter grabbed his phone. I'm going to call a lawyer, not the family lawyer. A shark. Someone who knows how to fight dirty. As they stood in the living room of the house they were about to lose, plotting to rob the only person who had ever offered them truth, they felt justified. Greed is a powerful drug. It can rewrite history. It can turn a savior into a thief. And tonight, Hunter and Latoya were high on it. They convinced themselves that they were the heroes of this story, marching off to reclaim stolen treasure, completely unaware that they were marching straight into a trap that had already been set. The phone rang at 9 in the morning 2 days later. I stared at the screen, watching Latoya's name flash. I let it ring until the very last second before picking up. I did not say hello. I just listened to her breathing on the other end. It was ragged and shallow, the sound of someone who had been rehearsing lines in a mirror for an hour. I am sorry, Camille, she choked out. I sat at my kitchen table, running my finger along the rim of my teacup. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to fill it. I mean it, she continued, her voice trembling. Mom told me I was out of line. Hunter told me I was being crazy. We were just so stressed about the house and the baby that does not exist, and everything just spiraled. I miss Nana. I really miss her. And today is the 1-month anniversary of her stroke, remember? We are having a small dinner tonight. Just family. Please come. It was a lie. Nana had her stroke 6 weeks ago, not 4. But Latoya never paid attention to dates unless they were her own birthday. I leaned back in my chair. Why would I come, Latoya? The last time I saw you, you were standing in my living room demanding my life savings. Because we want to make it right, she said quickly. Hunter wants to apologize. Mom made your favorite peach cobbler. Please, Camille, we are falling apart here. We need our big sister. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the prey walk into the snare. I knew exactly why they were calling. They knew about the money now. Hunter's friend at the bank had surely tipped them off about my new VIP status. They were not inviting me over to apologize. They were inviting me over to rob me. Okay, I said softly. I will be there at 7. I hung up the phone. Then I went to my closet. I did not choose a soft, forgiving outfit. I chose a structured black dress that looked like armor. I opened my safe and took out a small digital voice recorder. I taped it to the inside of my bra right against my ribcage. Then I took the decoy document, the high-quality forgery I had created yesterday, using aged paper and a laser printer, and placed it inside the safe. I set the lock. I checked the hidden camera I had installed in the bookshelf facing the safe. Everything was ready. I drove to the Hyde Park mansion slowly. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. Majestic. Imposing. But I knew the rot was spreading from the inside. There were no lights on in the upstairs windows. They were probably saving electricity. Hunter opened the door before I could even knock. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a glass of wine. His smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "Camille, looking great, really great," he said, ushering me inside. "I am so glad you came. Here, let me take your coat. Can I get you a drink?" We opened a bottle of the good stuff, Screaming Eagle Cabernet. I knew that bottle. Nana had saved it for her 80th birthday. Hunter had raided the cellar. "Sure," I said. "Just a small glass." He poured a glass that was anything but small. It was filled to the brim. He handed it to me, his fingers lingering on the stem. "To family," he said, clinking his glass against mine, hard enough to threaten the crystal. "To family," I echoed. I took a tiny sip. It was excellent wine wasted on terrible people. We moved into the dining room. The table was set with Nana's fine china. My mother was bringing out platters of food, acting the role of the doting matriarch. "There she is," Shirley cooed. "My successful daughter. Sit down, Camille. I made the roast just how you like it." We ate in a tense, performative atmosphere. They asked me questions about my job, questions they had never asked in 10 years. They complimented my dress. They laughed too hard at my dry comments. Every few minutes, Hunter would refill my wine glass even though I had barely touched it. I decided to give them what they wanted. I started to let my eyelids droop. I laughed a little too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. I slurred a word here and there. "You know," I said, leaning forward and resting my chin on my hand, "I really missed you guys. It is hard being alone in that apartment." Latoya reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was sweaty. "You are never alone, Cammy. We are here. We are just worried about you. You have been under so much pressure with the inheritance stuff." Hunter leaned in, his eyes sharp and focused. "Yeah, Camille, that policy. I have been thinking about it. It is amazing that you found it. But aren't you worried about keeping something that valuable in a rental apartment? I mean, thefts happen all the time." I took a large gulp of wine, letting a drop run down my chin before wiping it away clumsily. "I am not worried," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "I have a system." "A system?" Shirley asked, her voice tight. "Yeah, a safe. I bought a heavy-duty safe, bolted it to the floor in my closet." Hunter exchanged a quick glance with Latoya. I saw it. It was a micro-expression of triumph. "That is smart," Hunter said. "Really smart. But safes can be cracked. Did you deposit the paper yet?" I shook my head, making my movements exaggerated and loose. "No. The bank said they need the original. I have to bring it in on Monday, so it is just sitting there, right in the closet, waiting for me to be a millionaire." I laughed, a slurry, messy sound. "Wow," Latoya said. "That makes me nervous just hearing it. You must have a crazy complicated code for that safe." I looked at her, widening my eyes innocently. "Not really. I am bad with numbers. You know that, Toya. I just used Nana's birthday. June 10th, 1942. 61042. Easy to remember." The silence that followed was electric. I could practically hear them memorizing the sequence. 61042. Hunter poured more wine into my glass. "You should probably change that, Camille. That is too easy to guess." "I will, I promised. I will change it on Monday, after I get the money. But right now, I am just so tired." I rubbed my temples. "This wine is strong, Hunter. I think I need to go home. I am feeling a little dizzy." "No, stay," Shirley insisted. "Have some dessert." I stood up, swaying slightly on my heels. I grabbed the back of the chair for support. "I can't, Mom. I really need to lie down. Thank you for dinner. It was nice to be a family again." Hunter stood up quickly. "I will walk you to your car. You shouldn't drive if you are tipsy. Do you want me to call you an Uber?" I waved him off. "I am fine. I only had 2 glasses. I will drive slow. Just let me go." I stumbled toward the door. I let my purse hit the frame as I walked out, ensuring I looked uncoordinated. Hunter watched me from the porch, his eyes cold and calculating. "Drive safe, Camille," he called out. I got into my car. I fumbled with my keys for a moment, dropping them on the floor mat, knowing he was watching. Finally, I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. I drove down the block, swerving slightly until I turned the corner. The moment the house was out of sight, my posture straightened. The slur disappeared from my mind. The fog of the alcohol vanished because I had spit most of it back into my napkin when they weren't looking. I pulled over into a dark parking lot 3 blocks away. I reached into my bra and pulled out the recorder. I stopped the recording. I had everything I needed: their fake apologies, their probing questions, and most importantly, I had established the timeline. I checked the app on my phone connected to the hidden camera in my apartment. The feed showed my silent, empty bedroom. The safe was sitting in the corner of the closet, glowing faintly in the night vision mode. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling's personal number. "Ms. Carter," he answered on the first ring. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is going exactly according to plan," I said, my voice crisp and sober. "I just left their house. They know the code, they know the location, and judging by the look in Hunter's eyes, he is desperate enough to move tonight." "Do you want me to alert the police?" Sterling asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let them break in. Let them open the safe. Let them put their fingerprints on the decoy document. I want there to be zero doubt when the handcuffs go on." I watched the screen of my phone. "Go ahead, Hunter," I whispered. "Go get your treasure." I put the car in drive and headed toward a hotel downtown. I wasn't going to sleep at my apartment tonight. I wanted to give them the privacy they needed to destroy themselves completely. The stage was set. The actors knew their lines. Now all I had to do was wait for the final act. The digital clock on my dashboard read 2:14 in the morning. The street was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the sodium streetlights. I was parked 2 blocks away from my own apartment building, sitting in the driver's seat of my rental car with the engine off and the windows rolled up. The only light inside the vehicle came from my iPad screen, which was resting on my lap. It was strange to watch your own home being invaded. You would think I would feel violated or afraid, but I felt nothing but a cold, clinical satisfaction. It was like watching a nature documentary where a predator is about to walk into a trap. On the screen, the black and white night vision feed from my living room camera showed a shadow moving across the window. A moment later, I heard the faint sound of glass breaking through the audio feed. They were late. I had expected them at 2 o'clock sharp. I switched the camera view to the alleyway behind the building. My sister's white Range Rover was parked illegally near the dumpster, the engine idling. I could see LaToya in the driver's seat. Even in the grainy footage, she looked terrified. She kept checking her rearview mirror, her head snapping back and forth like a nervous bird. She was the lookout, but she was terrible at it. If a police car had rolled by, her body language alone would have been probable cause for a search. I turned my attention back to the interior camera. A figure climbed through the kitchen window. He was wearing black sweatpants, a dark hoodie, and a ski mask that looked like he had bought it at a gas station an hour ago. He landed on my kitchen floor with a heavy thud that probably woke up my downstairs neighbor. "Hunter." He stood up and pulled a flashlight from his pocket. The beam cut through the darkness of my apartment, sweeping across my bookshelves and my antique desk. He moved with the clumsy urgency of a man who had never committed a crime before, but was driven by a debt that terrified him more than prison. I watched him move into the hallway. I tapped the screen to switch to the bedroom camera. This was the angle I had set up perfectly. The camera was hidden inside the spine of a hollowed-out encyclopedia on the bookshelf, pointing directly at the closet. Hunter kicked the bedroom door open. He didn't need to. It was unlocked, but adrenaline makes people do stupid things. He shined the flashlight directly into the open closet. There it was. The heavy steel safe I had bolted to the floorboards yesterday. It looked imposing. It looked impenetrable. To Hunter, it looked like the answer to all his prayers. He rushed over to it, falling to his knees. I turned up the volume on my iPad. I could hear his heavy breathing. It sounded ragged and desperate. He pulled his phone out of his pocket to check the code. I watched him punch the numbers into the keypad. 61042. The electronic beep of each key press was loud in the silent room. Beep, 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 beep. There was a pause. Then the mechanical whir of the locking bolts retracting. A green light flashed on the safe door. "Gotcha," I heard Hunter whisper. He pulled the handle and the heavy door swung open. He reached inside. His hand came out holding a single sheet of yellowed paper inside a clear plastic protective sleeve. He sat back on his heels, shining the flashlight directly onto the document. He was examining it, checking the corner where the coffee stain was. I zoomed in on the video feed. I could see the triumph on his face even through the mask. He thought he had won. He thought he was holding $8.4 million in his hands. What he was actually holding was a masterpiece of forgery. I am an appraiser and a restorer. My job is to know the difference between the real and the fake, and sometimes to repair the old to look new. But yesterday I had done the opposite. I had taken a sheet of 60-year-old blank bond paper from my supply at work. I had used a specialized ink mixture to replicate the fading of a 1965 typewriter. I had even used a damp sponge soaked in stale coffee to recreate the exact stain LaToya had made at the lawyer's office. To the untrained eye, to a desperate man like Hunter, it was perfect. It had the right texture, the right smell, the right visual weight. But if he had looked at the serial number under a magnifying glass, he would have noticed that two of the digits were transposed. And if he had checked the red wax seal, he would have seen that it was made of modern synthetic wax, not the organic beeswax blend used in the 60s. But Hunter was not looking for details. He was looking for salvation. He pulled out his phone again. He snapped a picture of the document. Then his thumbs flew across the screen, typing a text message. I watched the timestamp on the video. 2:19 a.m. He was texting his lawyer. Or maybe the loan shark. It didn't matter. He was creating a digital trail of his intent to distribute stolen property. He shoved the document, plastic sleeve and all, into the front pocket of his hoodie. He stood up, cast one last look around my bedroom, and ran out. I switched back to the alley camera. A minute later, Hunter burst out of the back door. He sprinted to the Range Rover and jumped into the passenger seat. The car peeled out of the alley with a screech of tires that echoed in the quiet night. They didn't even turn their headlights on until they were at the end of the block. I sat in the dark for a long time after they were gone. I reached into the glove compartment of my rental car and pulled out a metal lockbox. I unlocked it with a key I kept around my neck. Inside lay the real Mutual of Chicago policy, safe and sound. I looked at the iPad screen again. The video file had finished saving to the cloud. I had them. I had everything: breaking and entering, grand larceny, conspiracy. And because they crossed state lines to get to the dirty lawyer Hunter mentioned at dinner, I could probably get federal charges added to the list if I wanted to be really petty. But I wasn't just being petty. I was being thorough. I opened my email app. I composed a new message to Mr. Sterling at the bank and attached the video file. Subject: unauthorized access to collateral. Body: Mr. Sterling is discussed. My estranged family members have just stolen what they believe to be the original asset. Please consider this video evidence that the document in their possession is stolen property. Also, please note that any attempt by them to present this document to your bank should be met with immediate security protocols. I will be filing a police report in the morning. I hit send. Then I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. I pictured Hunter and LaToya right now. They were probably cheering. They were probably crying tears of relief, thinking they had outsmarted me. They were probably popping another bottle of Nana's expensive wine, toasting to their brilliance. Let them have their moment. Let them have one night of peaceful sleep. Because when they woke up tomorrow, They were going to find out that the paper they stole was worth less than the mask Hunter wore to steal it. I started the car engine. The heater kicked on, warming my cold hands. I drove away from my apartment, leaving the broken window and the empty safe behind. I wasn't going back there. That life was over. The woman who let her family walk all over her was gone. Tomorrow I was going to the police station. And then I was going to buy a house. A very specific house in Hyde Park that was about to hit the foreclosure market. The hunt was over. The trap had snapped shut, and the prey didn't even know they were already dead. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Mutual of Chicago building with a brilliance that Hunter must have taken as a sign from God. I was not there to see him walk through the revolving doors, but I had a front row seat to the security feed thanks to Mr. Sterling. I sat in my hotel room sipping coffee, watching my brother-in-law strut into the lobby, wearing a suit that cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. He held a leather briefcase in his hand, gripping the handles so tightly his knuckles were white. Inside that briefcase was the forgery I had crafted with such care, the fake document he had stolen from my safe less than 8 hours ago. Hunter walked straight to the executive client desk. He did not wait in line. In his mind, he was already a multimillionaire. He was no longer the desperate man begging for a loan. He was a Class A shareholder. He was royalty. I watched him slap the plastic sleeve onto the marble counter. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, whom Mr. Sterling had briefed personally, looked up. She did not flinch. She did not roll her eyes like Brenda had done to me. She had her instructions. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice professional and calm. "I am here to liquidate an asset." Hunter announced, his voice booming slightly in the quiet lobby. "I am the executor of the estate that holds this policy. I want a wire transfer. Today." Sarah picked up the document. She handled it with white cotton gloves, a nice theatrical touch that Mr. Sterling must have suggested. She opened the plastic sleeve and slid out the yellowed paper. She pretended to examine the wax seal. She pretended to check the serial number against her computer screen. I watched Hunter on the monitor. He was sweating. A single bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. He was trying to look bored, checking his watch, tapping his foot. But I knew his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. This was the moment. If she said it was fake, he would run. If she called the police, he would claim he found it. But Sarah typed a few keys on her keyboard. Then she looked up and smiled. "Everything appears to be in order, sir," she said. Hunter let out a breath that fogged the plexiglass barrier. He slumped slightly against the counter, the relief washing over him so visibly it was pathetic. "Great," he said, his arrogance returning instantly. "So 8.4 million, right? That is the number my sources gave me." "The current valuations is accurate," Sarah confirmed. "However, for a liquidation of this magnitude, there is a standard 48-hour processing period for security verification." Hunter's face fell. 48 hours, I need the funds now. "I can issue you a provisional receipt," Sarah said, sliding a piece of paper across the counter. "It confirms that the document has been received and the transfer is pending final executive approval. Once the board signs off, the funds will be wired directly to the account you provide." Hunter picked up the receipt. It was printed on heavy bond paper with the bank's logo at the top. It had a tracking number. It had a stamp that said "Received." To a man drowning in debt, that piece of paper looked like a life raft. "Is this guaranteed?" Hunter asked. "As long as the document is authentic, the payout is guaranteed," Sarah said, her eyes not wavering for a second. Hunter grinned. It was a wide, greedy shark-like grin. He knew it was authentic. He had stolen it himself from my safe. He had seen the age of the paper. He had seen the coffee stain. In his twisted logic, the fact that he had to steal it proved it was real. "Perfect," Hunter said. He snatched the receipt and shoved it into his pocket. "You tell the board to hurry up. I have investments to make." He walked out of that bank like he owned the city. He did not know that the receipt he was carrying was worthless. He did not know that the moment he left, Sarah picked up the phone and called the legal department to log the evidence chain. He did not know that he had just handed the bank the physical proof of his crime. But ignorance is bliss, and Hunter was about to have a very blissful afternoon. He did not go home. He went straight to the Porsche dealership on Michigan Avenue. I tracked his location through the GPS on his phone, which I still had access to from the time he asked me to fix his iCloud settings 2 years ago. I watched the blue dot move to the dealership and stay there for 2 hours. When he emerged, he was not driving his leased sedan. He was driving a brand new slate gray Porsche 911. He didn't have the money to pay for it, of course, but with a receipt from Mutual of Chicago showing a pending transfer of $8 million and a salesman hungry for a commission, Hunter had managed to talk his way into a predatory financing deal. He probably signed a contract with an interest rate that would make a loan shark blush, confident that he would pay it all off in 2 days. He drove that car back to Hyde Park, revving the engine at every stoplight, desperate for attention. When he pulled into the driveway of the mansion, LaToya and Shirley were waiting on the porch. They must have heard the engine from blocks away. I can only imagine the scene, but knowing them, it followed a predictable script. Hunter stepped out of the car wearing sunglasses, tossing the keys to LaToya. "It is done," he shouted, throwing his arms out wide. "We are rich!" Baby LaToya screamed and ran to him, jumping into his arms. They spun around in the driveway, laughing like maniacs. Shirley stood on the porch, clapping her hands, looking at the car with hungry eyes. "Did you get the money?" Shirley asked, ever the pragmatist. "I got the receipt," Hunter yelled, pulling the paper from his pocket and waving it like a flag. 8.4 million. It hits the account on Wednesday. He walked up the steps and hugged Shirley. "You were right, Mom. You were right about everything. We just had to take what was ours." "I told you," Shirley said, patting his cheek. "Camille was just holding it for us. She did not know what to do with that kind of power." "But you, Hunter, you are a businessman." They went inside to celebrate. And because Hunter was Hunter, he didn't just open a bottle of wine. He started spending money he didn't have online. I sat in my hotel room monitoring the credit alerts that were still linked to my old address. Order confirmation, Saks Fifth Avenue, 3 handbags, $12,000. Order confirmation, Expedia, first-class tickets to the Maldives, 4 tickets, $20,000. Order confirmation, Tesla, a reservation deposit for a Model X. He was spiraling. He was in a manic episode fueled by greed and relief. He was digging a hole so deep that when the ground finally collapsed, he would never see sunlight again. But the worst part, the part that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time, was the text message LaToya sent to our family group chat. She evidently forgot to remove me, or maybe she wanted me to see it. It was a photo of them in the living room. Hunter was holding a glass of champagne. LaToya was wearing one of Nana's diamond necklaces. Shirley was sitting in Nana's favorite armchair, smiling like the cat that ate the canary. The caption read, "Justice is served. Finally getting the life we deserve. Bye-bye, toxic people." I looked at the photo. I looked at their smiles. They looked so happy. They looked so secure. I zoomed in on the coffee table in the photo. Sitting right there next to the champagne bucket was the processing receipt from the bank. I took a screenshot. Then I forwarded the screenshot to Mr. Sterling with a simple note, "Evidence of intent to defraud." My phone buzzed a minute later. It was Mr. Sterling. "Mrs. Carter, the legal team has everything they need. The police are ready to move on your timeline. When do you want to execute the warrant?" I looked at the photo again. I looked at the timestamp. It was 4 in the afternoon. "Let them have tonight," I typed back. "Let them sleep in that house one last time. Let them dream about the Maldives. Tomorrow morning, Hunter is going to court to sue me. I want the arrest to happen there. I want the judge to see it." "Understood," Sterling replied. "We will be ready." I put my phone down and walked to the window of the hotel. I looked out at the city of Chicago. Somewhere out there, my sister was packing a suitcase for a vacation she would never take. My brother-in-law was driving a car that would be repossessed before the first oil change, and my mother was planning a renovation on a house she was about to be evicted from. They were celebrating their victory, but they were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and I had just spotted the iceberg. Blind confidence is a dangerous drug. It makes you feel invincible right up until the moment you hit the wall. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, the wall was coming for them. You would think that a man who just successfully deposited a stolen document worth $8 million would lay low. You would think he would sit quietly in his mansion, wait for the wire transfer to clear, and thank his lucky stars that he hadn't been caught. But criminals like Hunter are not driven by logic. They are driven by a toxic cocktail of greed and paranoia. And in Hunter's mind, winning wasn't enough. He needed to make sure I could never fight back. He needed to destroy my credibility before I even realized what he had done. The morning after his trip to the bank, Hunter walked into the office of Lionel P. Grantham. Grantham was not a respectable attorney. His office was located in a strip mall between a vape shop and a payday lender, and his billboards usually featured him pointing a finger with the slogan, "We fight dirty so you do not have to." He was the kind of lawyer who chased ambulances and smelled like stale cigar smoke. He was perfect for Hunter. Hunter sat in the cheap leather chair, tapping his fingers on the desk. He looked manic. He had not slept. He had spent the night researching extradition laws in the Maldives and looking at real estate listings he could not afford. "I want to sue her," Hunter said, his voice jittery. "I do not just want the money, Grantham. I want a restraining order. I want criminal charges. I want to freeze her assets before she tries to claim a piece of this pie." Grantham leaned back, steepling his fingers. He looked at the receipt from Mutual of Chicago that Hunter had slammed onto the desk. He saw the pending amount. His eyes glittered. "Mr. Miller, if this receipt is valid, you have significant leverage," Grantham wheezed. "But on what grounds do we sue Mrs. Carter? She hasn't actually done anything yet, has she?" "She stole from the estate." Hunter lied. The words came out smooth and practiced. He had convinced himself it was the truth. "My wife's grandmother was senile in her final years. We believe Camille Carter used undue influence to manipulate the old woman. She tried to hide estate assets. That insurance policy belongs to my wife Latoya. Camille took it from the house without permission. She is a thief, and I am worried she is going to try to commit fraud to get it back." Grantham smiled. It was a greasy, unpleasant expression. "Ah. Elder abuse. Conversion of assets. Emotional distress. We can work with that. We can file an emergency motion today. We will paint her as a predator who preyed on a confused old lady. By the time she gets a lawyer, the money will be in your account, and she will be fighting to stay out of jail." "Do it," Hunter said. "Serve her at work. I want everyone to see it. I want her humiliated." Hunter left that office feeling invincible. He thought he was playing 4D chess. He thought he was striking a preemptive blow that would knock me off the board completely. He did not realize that in the game of chess, the pawn does not attack the queen without consequences. 3 hours later, I was in the back room of the auction house where I worked. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of beeswax and old wood. I was in the middle of a delicate restoration on a 19th century French clock. My hands were steady as I adjusted the escapement mechanism with a pair of fine tweezers. I loved this work. I loved taking something broken and forgotten and making it tick again. It required patience. It required precision. Two things my family knew nothing about. The bell above the front door chimed. I heard my assistant Sarah talking to someone. "She is in the back, but she is busy," Sarah said. "I am not here to buy a clock," a man's voice replied. "I have a delivery for Camille Carter." I set down my tweezers. I wiped my hands on my apron. I knew what this was. Mr. Sterling had warned me that there had been a credit inquiry from a law firm known for frivolous litigation. Hunter was moving faster than I expected. I walked out to the front showroom. A man in a windbreaker was standing there holding a thick envelope. He looked bored. "Camille Carter?" he asked. "That is me," I said. "You have been served," he said, thrusting the envelope into my hands. He turned and walked out before I could even blink. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. "Camille, is everything okay? Is that bad news?" I looked at the envelope. It was heavy. It felt like a declaration of war. "It is nothing, Sarah," I said calmly. "Just some family business." I took the envelope to my desk and slid it open with a letter opener. I pulled out the stack of papers. The header was in bold, aggressive font. The Superior Court of Cook County. Plaintiff Hunter Miller and LaToya Carter. Defendant Camille Carter. I began to read, and as I read, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't fear. It was disgust. They had accused me of everything. Count 1, elder abuse. The plaintiff alleges that the defendant, Camille Carter, knowingly took advantage of the decedent, Rose Carter, during a period of mental decline to secure financial favors. Count 2, theft of property. The plaintiff alleges that the defendant removed a financial instrument worth $8 million from the primary residence of the estate. Count 3, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The plaintiff claims the defendant has harassed the family and caused significant psychological harm to LaToya Carter, causing complications in her pregnancy. I stared at that last line. Her pregnancy. The pregnancy that did not exist. They were willing to perjure themselves in a court of law. They were willing to drag Nana's name through the mud, calling her senile and incompetent, just to justify their greed. Nana Rose was sharp as a tack until the day she died. She was the smartest woman I ever knew. To see her memory insulted like this by the people she tried to protect was the final straw. Hunter didn't just want the money. He wanted to destroy my character. He wanted to paint me as a villain so he could feel like a hero. I turned the page. There was a demand letter attached. "We demand the immediate return of all copies of the Mutual of Chicago policy. We demand a settlement of $500,000 for emotional damages. Failure to comply will result in further legal action." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound in the quiet shop. $500,000. That was the exact amount he owed the loan sharks. He was trying to squeeze me one last time before the big payout. I checked the time. It was 2 in the afternoon. Hunter's lawsuit had been filed electronically this morning. That meant it was public record. Perfect. I picked up my phone. I did not call a defense attorney. I did not call LaToya to beg for mercy. I dialed the direct private line of Mr. Sterling. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Carter, I assume you received the package. I am holding it right now," I said, my voice steady. "They are suing me, Mr. Sterling. They are accusing me of elder abuse and theft." There was a silence on the line. I could hear Mr. Sterling shifting in his chair. "That is unfortunate for them," Sterling said. "Filing a false police report is one thing, but filing a fraudulent lawsuit to claim ownership of stolen property, that is a felony, Ms. Carter. They just weaponized the court system to further a crime." I looked at the clock I had been fixing. It was ticking steadily now. The gears were meshing perfectly. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "I am done waiting. I am done letting them think they are winning. They wanted a legal battle. Let's give them one." "Are you sure?" Sterling asked. "Once we do this, there is no going back. The district attorney is ready. The fraud department is ready." I ran my thumb over the signature on the lawsuit. Hunter Miller. "Activate Phase 2, I said. "Understood," Sterling said. His voice shifted, becoming professional and ruthless. "I am freezing the provisional receipt account immediately. When Hunter tries to check his balance tonight, he will see a security flag. And I am forwarding this lawsuit to the federal prosecutor. By claiming ownership of the policy in a court filing, he has just provided a signed confession that he is in possession of the stolen asset. He literally signed his own arrest warrant." Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said. And one more thing. Yes, make sure the police know where to find him tomorrow morning. The hearing for the restraining order is at 9 a.m. I will be there. You want them arrested at the courthouse? Sterling asked. That is very dramatic. They wanted a show, I said, looking at the false accusations one last time. They wanted to humiliate me in public. It is only fair that I return the favor. I hung up the phone. I put the lawsuit back in the envelope. I did not throw it away. I placed it gently in my bag. Sarah was still watching me, looking worried. Camille, are you sure you are okay? You look intense. I smiled at her. It was the first genuine smile I had smiled in days. I am better than okay, Sarah. I just finished fixing something that has been broken for a very long time. I walked back to my workbench. I picked up my tweezers. The clock was ticking. And for Hunter and Latoya, time had just run out. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that I will forever associate with the death of my family. I sat at the defense table next to Mr. Vance, the senior litigator provided by the Mutual of Chicago legal team. He was a shark in a $3,000 suit, tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad, looking bored. To him, this was just another Tuesday. To me, it was the funeral of the last shred of hope I had for my mother and sister. Across the aisle, Hunter, Latoya, and Shirley sat with their strip mall lawyer, Grantham. They looked like they were dressed for a photo shoot. Latoya was wearing a pastel cardigan that made her look soft and fragile. Hunter was in his new suit, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Shirley was wearing her Sunday best, a large cross necklace resting conspicuously on her chest. They were performing. They were putting on a play called The Innocent Victims, and they expected the judge to give them a standing ovation. The judge, a stern man named Judge Holloway, with wire-rimmed glasses, called the court to order. He looked at the docket with a frown. We are here to hear the plaintiff's motion for emergency injunctive relief and the return of property, Judge Holloway said. Mr. Grantham, call your first witness. Grantham stood up, buttoning his cheap jacket. We call Hunter Miller to the stand. Hunter walked to the witness box. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I watched him do it without blinking. He didn't even flinch. He sat down and adjusted the microphone, looking directly at me with a smirk. Mr. Miller, Grantham began. Please tell the court what happened on the night of the burglary. Hunter cleared his throat. He put on his best voice, the one he used when he was trying to sell a scam coin to an unsuspecting investor. Your Honor, my wife Latoya inherited a valuable financial instrument from her grandmother. It was an insurance policy worth over $8 million. We kept it in a safe in our home. But my sister-in-law Camille was jealous. She has always been jealous of Latoya. On the night in question, she came to our house for dinner. She acted drunk. She stumbled around. We believe she unlocked a window while she was pretending to use the bathroom. Later that night, someone broke in and stole the document. And how do you know it was the defendant? Grantham asked. Because the next day she tried to deposit it. Hunter lied smooth as silk. But she failed. Fortunately, I was able to recover the document before she could liquidate it. I took it to the bank immediately to secure the funds for the estate. Hunter reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out 2 pieces of paper. This is the document in question, Your Honor, Hunter said, holding up the yellowed paper inside the plastic sleeve. The fake document, the decoy I had created in my workshop. And this is the receipt from Mutual of Chicago dated yesterday, confirming that they have received the asset and are processing the transfer of $8.4 million to my account. He handed the papers to the bailiff, who handed them to the judge. Judge Holloway looked at the receipt. He looked at the yellowed paper. He nodded slowly. It seems the bank has accepted this as valid, the judge noted. Yes, Your Honor, Hunter said, puffing out his chest. They validated it on the spot. But now Camille is trying to block the transfer. She is claiming it is hers. She is trying to steal my wife's inheritance. We just want what is rightfully ours so we can move on with our lives. Thank you, Mr. Miller, Grantham said. Mr. Vance leaned over to me. "Do you want to cross-examine him now?" he whispered. "Not yet," I whispered back. "Let them dig the hole deeper. I want them all in it." Hunter stepped down looking triumphant. He high-fived Grantham as he passed the table. Next, Grantham called LaToya Carter. LaToya walked to the stand. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue before she even sat down. She looked small and pathetic. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. Mrs. Carter Grantham asked softly, "How has this ordeal affected you?" LaToya sniffled into the microphone. "It has been a nightmare. My grandmother Nana Rose was my best friend. She told me she wanted me to have everything. She knew Camille was difficult. Camille has always been cold. She never cared about family. She only cares about money." LaToya looked at me, her eyes filling with fresh, fake tears. "When I found out she tried to steal the policy, I was heartbroken." LaToya sobbed. "I am pregnant, Your Honor. The stress. The doctor says the stress is bad for the baby. I just want to secure my child's future. Why is she doing this to us? Why can she not just let us be happy?" I gripped the edge of the table. The pregnancy lie again. She was doubling down on it under oath. She was using a non-existent child to manipulate a judge. It was sick, it was twisted, and it was working. I saw the judge's face soften. He looked at LaToya with sympathy. "I am sorry for your distress, Mrs. Carter," Judge Holloway said gently. LaToya stepped down, shaking like a leaf. Shirley wrapped her arm around her when she got back to the table, glaring at me like I was a monster. Finally, Grantham called his star witness. "Shirley Carter." My mother walked to the stand. She stood tall, radiating self-righteousness. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore the oath with a firm, loud voice. To her, God was just another manager she could speak to if she wasn't getting her way. Mrs. Carter Grantham asked, "You are the mother of both the plaintiff and the defendant. Can you tell us about the deceased's wishes regarding this insurance policy?" Shirley took a deep breath. She looked straight at the judge. "My mother Rose was a traditional woman," Shirley said. "She believed in taking care of the family unit. LaToya is married. She is starting a family. Camille has always been a loner. She is independent. She does not need help." "But did your mother explicitly tell you who should get the policy?" Grantham pressed. This was the moment, the point of no return. Shirley nodded. "Yes." 2 days before she died, Rose held my hand. She looked me in the eye and said, "Shirley, make sure LaToya gets the papers in the shoebox. She is going to need them for the house." A gasp went through the courtroom. It was a lie. A bald-faced, terrible lie. 2 days before she died, Nana Rose was in a medically induced coma. She couldn't speak. Shirley knew that. I knew that. But Shirley was banking on the fact that dead women tell no tales. She promised it to LaToya. Shirley continued, her voice trembling with conviction. "I swear it on my life. I swear it on this Bible. Camille knows this. She is just acting out of spite because she is jealous of her sister's happiness. Camille has always been the black sheep, Your Honor. She has a darkness in her. She is greedy. I watched my mother. I watched the woman who gave birth to me assassinate my character in a court of law to help her favorite daughter steal $8 million. Any lingering doubt I had, any tiny flicker of guilt about what was about to happen, vanished. My heart turned to stone. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter," Grantham said, looking satisfied. "The plaintiffs, rest Your Honor." The courtroom was silent. Grantham looked at Mr. Vance and me with a smug expression. He thought he had slammed the door shut. He thought the testimony of a mother and a pregnant sister was unbeatable. Judge Holloway turned to Mr. Vance. "Does the defense have any witnesses?" the judge asked. Mr. Vance stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He didn't look bored anymore. He looked like a predator who had just smelled blood. "We have no witnesses, Your Honor," Vance said smoothly. "However, we do have a substantial amount of physical evidence that directly contradicts every single word we just heard." Hunter laughed out loud. It was a nervous, scoffing sound. What evidence, he muttered. Mr. Vance picked up a remote control from the table. Your Honor, the defense would like to present Exhibit A, B, and C, and I would like to request that the bailiff lock the doors to the courtroom. Why? Grantham asked, standing up. Because Vance said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. After I play these videos, I believe the district attorney who is waiting in the hallway will have some immediate business with the plaintiffs regarding perjury, grand larceny, and fraud. Hunter's face went pale. Shirley grabbed her cross necklace. Latoya stopped crying instantly. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my legs. Proceed, Mr. Vance, I said softly. The judge nodded. Proceed. Mr. Vance pointed the remote at the large monitor on the wall. The screen flickered to life, and the first image that appeared was the grainy black and white footage of a man in a ski mask dropping into my kitchen. I watched Hunter's eyes bulge. I watched the blood drain from his face until he looked like a ghost. The show was over. The trap was sprung, and the rats were caught in the cage. The courtroom lights dimmed as the bailiff lowered the blinds. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life, casting a cold blue glow over the faces of the people who had just perjured themselves to destroy me. I watched Hunter shift in his seat. He was tugging at his collar, sweat already beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. He knew something was wrong. He just did not know how wrong yet. Mr. Vance stood in the center of the room, holding the remote control like a weapon. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have constructed a very moving narrative today, Vance said, his voice echoing in the silent room. They have told you a story about a beloved grandmother, a pregnant sister, and a greedy aunt. It is a compelling story, but it has one fatal flaw. It is entirely fiction. And unlike the plaintiffs, I do not ask you to take my word for it. I ask you to watch. Vance pressed the button. Exhibit A appeared on the screen. It was high-definition security footage from the conference room at the funeral home. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago. The audio was crisp. Everyone in the courtroom heard Latoya's voice, sharp and mocking. I will save you the embarrassment of trying to cash a check for chump change. On the screen, Latoya laughed. She crumpled the yellow document into a ball. She tossed it into the trash can. Trash belongs with trash. Hunter's voice boomed from the speakers. The video paused on a freeze frame of the paper sitting in the garbage stained with coffee. Vance turned to the judge. Your Honor, under Illinois state law, when an individual voluntarily discards an item into a waste receptacle and vacates the premises, they have legally abandoned that property. By throwing the policy away, Latoya Carter relinquished all ownership rights. When my client, Camille Carter, retrieved it, she became the lawful owner. It is the legal equivalent of finding a couch on the curb. You cannot come back 3 days later and demand it back just because you found out it was an antique. I looked at Latoya. Her face was gray. She was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. Her lawyer Grantham had his head in his hands. He knew the law. He knew his case had just evaporated. But we are not done, Vance continued. Because while abandonment settles the civil dispute, what happened next moves us into criminal territory. Vance pressed the button again. Exhibit B flashed onto the screen. It was the night vision footage from my apartment. The timestamp was 2 a.m. the night before. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as a figure in a black hoodie and ski mask climbed through my window. They watched him creep into my bedroom. They watched him kneel before the safe. Hunter Miller let out a strangled noise in the back of his throat. That is not me, he shouted, jumping up. You cannot prove that is me. It is a guy in a mask. Sit down. Mr. Miller, Judge Holloway barked, slamming his gavel. Vance did not even look at Hunter. He just let the video play. On the screen, the intruder punched in the code. 61042. He opened the safe. He took out the document. And then, in a moment of pure hubris that I had prayed for, the intruder pulled down his mask for just a second to wipe sweat from his face. It was blurry, but it was undeniable. It was Hunter Miller. A gasp went through the courtroom. Shirley covered her mouth with her hand. Hunter sank back into his chair looking like he had been shot. Your Honor, Vance said, his voice hard as steel. You just watched the lead plaintiff commit felony burglary, breaking and entering, and grand larceny. He stole what he believed to be a financial instrument worth $8 million from my client's home. Vance walked over to the bailiff's table where the document Hunter had submitted as evidence was sitting. He picked it up with a pair of tweezers. But here is the twist, Your Honor. The document Hunter Miller stole, the document he just submitted to this court as evidence of his ownership, is a forgery. Vance signaled to the back of the room. A woman in a sharp gray suit stood up. We have a sworn affidavit from Dr. Arlene Posner, the leading forensic document examiner in Chicago, Vance said. She analyzed the paper fibers and the ink of the document in Mr. Miller's possession this morning. Vance projected the report onto the screen. The paper is modern stock, artificially aged with T and UV light, Vance read. The ink is from a modern laser printer, not a 1965 typewriter. And the wax seal. It is made of synthetic polymer used in candle making, not the beeswax blend used by the Mutual of Chicago in the 60s. I looked at Hunter. He was staring at the screen, his mouth open. He looked at the fake document in the lawyer's hand, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She set me up, Hunter whispered. The microphone picked it up. She set me up. Vance turned to face Hunter, his eyes cold. My client did not set you up, Mr. Miller. My client protected her asset. The real Mutual of Chicago policy, the one with the Class A shareholder rights, has been sitting in the vault of the Federal Reserve Bank since yesterday afternoon. My client deposited it immediately. What you stole from her safe was a decoy, a prop. And by bringing it into this courtroom and claiming it is yours, you have not only confessed to stealing it, you have attempted to defraud this court. Vance turned back to the judge. Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss all charges against Camille Carter with prejudice. Furthermore, we ask that the court detain the plaintiffs immediately. We believe they are a flight risk, given that Mr. Miller purchased 4 tickets to the Maldives yesterday afternoon using a credit card he obtained through bank fraud. Vance projected the Expedia receipt onto the screen. Judge Holloway looked at the screen. He looked at the fake document. Then he looked at Hunter, LaToya, and Shirley. The judge's face was a mask of fury. I had never seen a judge look so angry. He had been used. His courtroom had been mocked. Bailiff Judge Holloway said, his voice low and dangerous. Lock the doors. No one moved. The silence was absolute. Mr. Grantham, the plaintiff's lawyer, slowly stood up and moved away from his clients, distancing himself physically from the disaster. Your Honor, Grantham stammered. I had no idea. I was led to believe the document was authentic. I withdraw as counsel, effective immediately. You can withdraw, the judge snapped. But you will remain seated. The judge turned his gaze to Hunter. Mr. Miller, you came into my courtroom, swore an oath on the Bible, and presented stolen, forged evidence to support a frivolous lawsuit against the victim of your own crime. In 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such audacity. Hunter was shaking. He looked at LaToya, but she was staring straight ahead, paralyzed by shock. Shirley was murmuring a prayer, clutching her cross, but her eyes were darting around the room looking for an exit that did not exist. I sat there perfectly still. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched. This was the moment I had waited for. This was the payoff for every insult, every exclusion, every time they made me feel small. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was stupid because I was kind. But they forgot what I do for a living. I look for the truth beneath the surface. I spot the fakes. And I know exactly what things are worth. And right now, looking at my family huddled together in terror as the bailiffs unclipped their handcuffs, I knew exactly what they were worth. Nothing. Judge Holloway raised his gavel. Motion to dismiss granted, he ruled. The court finds in favor of the defendant Camille Carter. Now I would like the district attorney to step forward. I believe there are some warrants that need to be executed. The back doors opened. Two uniformed officers and a detective in a suit walked in. They walked straight toward the plaintiff's table. The sound of their heavy boots on the floor was the only sound in the room. Hunter stood up, knocking his chair over. "Wait!" he screamed. "It was a misunderstanding I can explain, officer," the judge said. "Take him into custody." I watched as the officer grabbed Hunter's arm and spun him around. I watched the metal cuffs click onto his wrists. I watched LaToya start to scream as a female officer grabbed her hands. It was over. The house of cards had fallen, and I was the only one left standing in the wreckage. The video screen faded to black, but the image of Hunter Miller pulling down his mask in my bedroom seemed to burn into the retina of everyone in the courtroom. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that happens when a lie is so thoroughly destroyed that truth is the only thing left standing, and it is terrifying. Judge Holloway slowly took off his glasses. He placed them on the bench next to his gavel. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with a weary frustration that terrified me more than his anger. When he looked up, his eyes were not looking at the lawyers. They were locked on Hunter. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen liars," Judge Holloway said, his voice dangerously low. "I have seen thieves. I have seen murderers. But Mr. Miller, I have never seen someone come into my courtroom with dirty hands and demand that I wash them for him." Hunter tried to stand up. His legs were shaking so hard the chair rattled against the floor. "Your Honor, please," Hunter stammered, sweat dripping down his nose. "It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to secure the asset. We thought she was going to lose it. I was protecting the family legacy." "Sit down!" the judge roared. The sound echoed off the wood paneling, making LaToya flinch as if she had been slapped. Judge Holloway turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Vance, you mentioned a motion regarding the status of the inheritance." Mr. Vance stood up. He did not look at Hunter. He looked at the judge with the calm precision of an executioner. "Yes, Your Honor. Under Illinois probate law, there is a principle known as the Slayer Rule. Traditionally, it prevents a person from inheriting from a deceased person if they are responsible for that person's death. However, there is a legal precedent in this district regarding the doctrine of unclean hands and the forfeiture of inheritance due to fraud against the estate." Vance walked over to the plaintiff's table. He looked down at LaToya, who was sobbing silently. "By forging a document to claim an asset of the estate, and by committing felony burglary to steal from another beneficiary, the plaintiffs have demonstrated a malicious intent to defraud the estate of Rose Carter. They have attempted to weaponize the probate process to commit a crime. Therefore, we ask the court to apply the extended forfeiture rule. We ask that Hunter Miller and LaToya Carter be disqualified from receiving any portion of the estate of Rose Carter." Hunter's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice cracking. "It means," Mr. Vance said, cold as ice, "that you do not just lose the insurance policy. You lose everything: the jewelry, the cash, and the house in Hyde Park." LaToya let out a scream. It was a raw animal sound of pure devastation. "No," she shrieked, standing up. "You cannot take my house. Nana left it to me. I live there. My things are there." Judge Holloway slammed his gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. "Mrs. Carter, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt," the judge shouted. He turned his gaze back to the papers in front of him. He grabbed a pen and began writing furiously. The scratching of the nib against the paper was the only sound in the room. Hunter was breathing in short, panic gasps. Shirley was rocking back and forth, clutching her Bible, murmuring, "Jesus help us," over and over again. Judge Holloway finished writing. He looked up. "I am granting the defense's motion," Judge Holloway announced. "The court finds that Hunter Miller and LaToya Carter have engaged in a criminal conspiracy to defraud the estate. Their actions in this courtroom today, including the submission of forged evidence and perjury, constitute a total violation of their duties as beneficiaries." He looked at LaToya. "Mrs. Carter, I am hereby vacating the previous probate order. The deed to the property in Hyde Park is revoked, effective immediately. The property will revert to the estate to be distributed to the remaining eligible beneficiary. He looked at me. Ms. Camille Carter, as the only remaining beneficiary with clean hands, the estate falls to you. The room spun for a second. I gripped the table. Nana's house. The house where I grew up. The house they kicked me out of. It was mine. But Judge Holloway was not done. He turned his eyes to Hunter. Mr. Miller, regarding your submission of Exhibit A, the forged insurance policy, and regarding the video evidence of your break-in, I am revoking your bail before it is even set. The judge pointed to the back of the room. Officers, take him into custody. The two police officers who had been waiting by the door stepped forward. The sound of their heavy boots hitting the floor was the drumbeat of justice. Hunter scrambled backward, knocking his chair over. He backed into the railing, his eyes wide with terror. "No, wait!" he yelled, holding his hands up. "It was not me. The video is blurry. You cannot prove it was me." One of the officers grabbed Hunter's arm. Hunter tried to pull away, flailing his arms like a child having a tantrum. "Get off me. Do you know who I am? I am a Class A shareholder. I have $8 million pending." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said, spinning Hunter around and slamming him chest first into the table. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. Click, click, tight. LaToya lunged for him. "Hunter, do something. Fix this." Another officer stepped in front of LaToya, blocking her path. "Ma'am, step back." Hunter was hauled to his feet. His expensive suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess. He looked at me as they dragged him past my table. His eyes were filled with hate, but beneath the hate was a bottomless pit of fear. "Camille," he screamed, spitting the words out. Tell them it was a prank. We are family. You cannot let them take me to jail." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked me at the funeral. The man who had laughed when my sister threw my inheritance in the trash. The man who had tried to steal my future. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the front of my dress. "I am sorry, Mr. Miller," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "I do not know you. And I certainly do not have any family who are criminals." Shirley ran to the railing as they dragged Hunter toward the side door. She turned to me, grabbing my arm with desperate claw-like fingers. "Camille, stop this. He is your brother-in-law. LaToya is pregnant. The stress will kill the baby. How can you be so heartless?" I pulled my arm away from her grip. I looked my mother in the eye. "There is no baby, Mom," I said coldly. "And now there is no house either. I suggest you go help LaToya pack. I am sending a locksmith to the mansion at 5 o'clock. If your things are not on the curb, I am donating them to charity." Shirley recoiled as if I had slapped her. She looked at me like she had never seen me before. And in a way, she had not. She had only ever seen the doormat she created. She had never met the woman who survived her. LaToya was wailing now, sinking to the floor in a puddle of pastel fabric and tears. "My house," she sobbed. "My beautiful house." Judge Holloway banged his gavel one last time. "Court is adjourned." Mr. Vance closed his briefcase. He turned to me and offered his hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. The title transfer paperwork will be ready tomorrow. And the district attorney says with the video evidence Hunter is looking at 5 to 7 years. Minimum." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." I picked up my purse. I walked past my sobbing sister. I walked past my stunned mother, who was shouting prayers at the ceiling. I walked past the empty chair where Hunter had sat so arrogantly just an hour ago. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom and stepped out into the hallway. The air was cooler here. It felt clean. I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere down there in the holding cells, Hunter was being processed. He was trading his Italian suit for an orange jumpsuit. He was trading his delusions of grandeur for a concrete cell. And somewhere in Hyde Park, a house was waiting for me. A house that needed to be cleaned. A house that needed to be purged of the ghosts of greedy people. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of freedom. Nana was right. Patience is a weapon. And I had just won the war without firing a single shot. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is loud in a quiet courtroom. It is a mechanical final sound that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of consequences. I watched as the bailiff pulled Hunter's arms behind his back. The arrogance that had defined him for years, the swagger he carried like a shield, evaporated instantly. In its place was the raw, ugly panic of a coward. Hunter did not go quietly, but go. As the reality of prison settled in, he turned on the only people who were left to blame. He did not look at me. He looked at his wife. "It was her idea," Hunter screamed, struggling against the grip of the officer. He twisted his body, his face red and distorted. "She is the one who wanted the money. She told me to break into the safe. I was just doing what she said." Latoya stood frozen near the plaintiff's table. Her hands were covering her mouth, her eyes wide with betrayal. She had spent her entire life believing she was the princess and Hunter was her prince. She believed they were partners in crime. But the moment the ship started sinking, the rat was the first one to jump. "Hunter," Latoya shrieked, her voice cracking. "How can you say that? You said you would fix everything. I am not going to jail for you," Hunter yelled back, spitting the words out as they dragged him toward the side door. "It is your house, Latoya. It is your debt. I am innocent." The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy. Latoya stood there trembling, looking at the closed door. Then she looked at our mother. Shirley was clutching her cross necklace so hard I thought the chain might snap. She looked at Latoya, then at me, then at the judge. For the first time in her life, she had no script. There was no manager to call. There was no way to manipulate her way out of a felony conspiracy ruling. I stood up and gathered my purse. I did not say a word to them. I did not need to. The look on Latoya's face as she realized her husband had just thrown her to the wolves was more satisfying than any speech I could have made. I walked out of the courtroom and into the bright Chicago sunlight. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. "It is done," I said. "Hunter is in custody. The judge voided the probate order. The house is legally mine." I heard the tapping of a keyboard on the other end. "Excellent," Mr. Sterling said. "I have the foreclosure team on standby. Since the previous mortgage was obtained through fraud by Hunter, the bank has authorized an immediate lockout to secure the asset. We are moving in now." "Do not be gentle," I said. I was not there to see the eviction personally, but the report I got from the security team later that afternoon painted a picture vivid enough to frame. It happened at 3 o'clock. The sky had turned a bruised purple, threatening rain. A black van pulled up to the mansion in Hyde Park. It was not a moving company. It was a foreclosure enforcement team. They did not knock politely. When Latoya and Shirley arrived back from the courthouse still in shock, they found the locks were already being drilled out. Shirley reportedly tried to scream at the men. She tried to pull the "Do you know who I am" card. She threatened to sue the bank, the city, and the locksmith. But the foreclosure agent simply handed her a copy of Judge Holloway's order. "You have 30 minutes to remove personal essentials," the agent told her. "Anything left on the property after that is considered forfeited." 30 minutes. 30 minutes to pack up a lifetime of entitlement. I can imagine the chaos inside that house. Latoya running up the stairs, sobbing, trying to shove her designer clothes into garbage bags because she didn't have any suitcases. The Louis Vuitton luggage she loved so much was likely bought on credit cards that were now frozen, so she probably couldn't even find them. Shirley was likely in the kitchen trying to save her expensive china, realizing she had nowhere to take it. She had alienated every friend she ever had. Her bridge club had stopped calling months ago because she owed them money. Her extended family had blocked her number after she tried to borrow cash from them. They were alone. At 3:45, the front door opened. Latoya stumbled out first. She was still wearing her pastel courtroom cardigan, but now it was stained with tears and sweat. She was dragging two black, heavy-duty trash bags behind her. The plastic scraped loudly against the concrete driveway. Shirley followed, carrying a laundry basket filled with random objects: a silver picture frame, a half-empty bottle of wine, a fur coat that looked ridiculous in the damp afternoon air. The foreclosure agent stepped out behind them. He pulled the door shut. He locked the new deadbolt. He slapped a neon orange sticker on the wood that read, "Possession of the estate." "Please," Latoya begged the agent, clinging to his sleeve. "We have nowhere to go. Just let us sleep here one more night. My husband is in jail. I am pregnant." The agent pulled his arm away. He knew about the fake pregnancy. Everybody knew. "You need to vacate the premises, ma'am. You are trespassing." They stood on the sidewalk as the black van drove away. The rain started to fall, a cold, drizzly Chicago mist that soaked through clothes in seconds. Latoya sat down on one of the trash bags. She looked at the mansion. The windows were dark. The ivy looked like bars on a cage. This was the house she had bragged about on Instagram. This was the symbol of her victory over me. And now she was sitting outside of it like the trash she had once called my inheritance. Shirley was frantically tapping on her phone. She was calling everyone she knew. I could imagine the desperation in her voice, the frantic spin she was trying to put on the story. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was Shirley. I let it ring. I watched the name dance on the screen. Then it stopped. A moment later, Latoya called. I picked up the phone, but I did not say anything. I just listened to the rain and the traffic on her end. Camille. Latoya's voice was small, broken, terrified. "Camille, please. We are on the street. It is raining. They locked us out. Hunter is gone. Mom is shaking. Please, Cammy. Just come get us. We can sleep on your floor. I will do anything. I am sorry. I am so sorry." I took a sip of my tea. I looked around my quiet, warm hotel room. "You are not sorry you did it, Latoya," I said softly. "You are only sorry you lost." "No, no, I swear," Latoya cried. "We are family." "You threw family in the trash," I said. "And now you know what it feels like to be discarded." "Camille. Please, I have a suggestion," I said. "There is a shelter on 35th Street. They take in people who have made bad life choices, but you should hurry. They close the doors at 5, and they do not accept people with expensive attitudes." "Camille." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I pressed the block button. Then I blocked Shirley. Then I blocked the house landline just to be thorough. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, two women were standing on a corner with garbage bags, realizing that the world does not owe them a living. They were realizing that the golden ticket they thought they had was actually a demolition order for their own lives. I felt a deep, vibrating sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was lighter than that. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack you have been carrying for 30 years. The police had Hunter. The streets had Latoya and Shirley. And I had the one thing they never thought I was worth. I had a future. I turned away from the window. I had a busy day tomorrow. I had to meet with the architects to discuss the renovation of my new house. I was going to paint the walls a color that didn't remind me of them. I was going to fill the rooms with art and silence. And the first thing I was going to do was buy a brand new, very expensive trash can. And I was going to put it right in the center of the kitchen as a reminder. A reminder that some things and some people belong in the garbage. It has been exactly 365 days since I walked out of that courtroom. Time is the ultimate truth teller. It reveals who built their house on stone and who built their house on sand. I stood on the podium in front of a renovated brick building in the heart of the Bronzeville district. The autumn wind was crisp, blowing stray leaves across the pavement, but I felt nothing but warmth. A crowd of 200 people stood before me. There were cameras flashing reporters, scribbling notes, and children from the neighborhood peering curiously from the edges of the crowd. To my right stood Mr. Sterling, the bank director, who had once trembled in his office, but was now my most trusted financial advisor. To my left was the mayor of Chicago. I looked up at the brass letters mounted above the heavy oak doors. The Nana Rose Center for Cultural Preservation. I leaned into the microphone. My voice did not shake. It rang out clear and strong, the voice of a woman who owns her space. My grandmother believed that history is not what is written in books, I said. It is what we keep in our attics. It is what we save in shoeboxes. It is the legacy we protect when the world tells us to throw it away. This center is dedicated to her memory and to the idea that nothing of value should ever be discarded. The crowd erupted in applause. I took the oversized ceremonial scissors and sliced through the red velvet ribbon. The fabric parted with a satisfying snap. As the cameras clicked, I felt a ghost of a smile touch my lips. I wondered if they had televisions in the state penitentiary. I wondered if Hunter was watching the news in the common room, seeing the sister-in-law he tried to rob standing next to the mayor. I hoped he was. After the ceremony, the reception was a blur of handshakes and champagne. I was exhausted but happy. When the last guest left, I got into my car. My driver, a quiet man named Marcus, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Home, Miss Carter?" he asked. I hesitated. I looked at the time. It was 7 o'clock. "Actually, Marcus, stop at the Whole Foods on Roosevelt. I need to pick up some fresh hydrangeas for the foyer." I could have sent an assistant. I could have had them delivered. But I still liked doing small things for myself. It kept me grounded. I walked into the supermarket. It was busy, filled with the evening rush of people buying dinner. I selected a beautiful bouquet of blue hydrangeas, Nana's favorite color. I walked to the checkout lanes. Most of the lanes were full, but lane 4 had just opened up. I pushed my cart toward it. The cashier was struggling with the conveyor belt. Her back was to me. She was wearing a green smock that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, frizzing at the edges as if it had not been conditioned in weeks. She looked tired. Her posture was slumped, defeated. I placed the flowers on the belt. "Did you find everything okay?" the cashier asked, her voice dull and automatic. She turned around to scan the item. Our eyes met. The world stopped spinning for a second. The woman standing before me was not the polished, arrogant influencer I had grown up with. The face was gaunt, stripped of the expensive makeup and fillers. There were dark circles under her eyes that no filter could hide. Her hands, once manicured with acrylic tips, were bare and chapped. It was LaToya. She froze, holding my hydrangeas in midair. She stared at me. She stared at my tailored Chanel suit. She stared at the diamond earrings that caught the fluorescent lights. Then she looked at my eyes. "Camille," she whispered. The name came out like a prayer. I did not blink. I did not gasp. I simply looked at her. She looked at the people in line behind me, then back at me. A spark of desperate hope ignited in her eyes. She leaned over the scanner, lowering her voice. "Oh my God, Cammy. Is it really you? I saw you on the news. You look amazing." She reached out a hand as if to touch my arm. "Cammy, please. It has been so hard. Mom is staying in a shelter. I am working double shifts. Hunter is, you know where he is. We have nothing. I miss you. I miss us. Can we just talk? I get off in 10 minutes. Please." I looked at her hand reaching for me. It was the same hand that had crumpled my inheritance. It was the same hand that had pointed at me in the courtroom while she lied to a judge. I stepped back. Marcus, my driver who had followed me inside to carry the bags, stepped smoothly between us. He was a large man, imposing in his black suit. He held up a hand, blocking LaToya. "Is there a problem here, Ms. Carter?" Marcus asked, his voice low and threatening. "Is this employee bothering you?" LaToya looked at Marcus, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she stammered. "I am her sister. Camille, tell him. Tell him I am your sister." The people in line were staring. The manager was walking over looking concerned. I looked at Latoya one last time. I looked for any sign of the girl I used to play with. I looked for any redeemable piece of the past. But all I saw was a stranger who had tried to destroy me for money. I turned to Marcus. "I have no idea who this woman is," I said. My voice was calm, indifferent. Latoya let out a gasp that sounded like a physical wound. "Camille, how can you say that?" I turned to the manager who had just arrived. "I believe this cashier is confused," I said coolly. "I would like to pay for my flowers and leave. Or should I take my business elsewhere?" "I am so sorry, Ms. Carter," the manager said, recognizing me instantly. He turned to Latoya, his voice sharp. "Latoya, get back to work or clock out. Stop harassing the customers." "But she is—" Latoya started to sob. I tapped my card on the terminal. The machine beeped. Approved. I took the flowers. I did not look back. I walked out of the store, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me, cutting off the sound of my sister weeping over a conveyor belt. I got into the back of my car. Marcus closed the door, sealing me in the quiet luxury of leather and silence. "Are you okay, Miss Carter?" Marcus asked as we pulled away into the night. I looked out the window. The city lights were blurring past. I thought about the trash can in the lawyer's office. I thought about the yellowed paper. I thought about the choices we make. "I am perfect, Marcus," I said. I leaned my head back against the seat. For years, they had treated me like I was disposable. They had tried to throw me away. But they never understood the first rule of appraisal. Value is not determined by the person who throws the object away. It is determined by the person who rescues it. I had rescued myself. They thought the trash was the paper, but the trash was the toxicity, the abuse, the conditional love, and I had finally taken it out. The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, heading toward my new home. It was a beautiful night. The stars were shining, and for the first time in my life, the view was completely clear. This story teaches us that your true value is never defined by those who fail to appreciate you. Camille's family saw her as disposable because they were blinded by their own greed and superficiality. They threw away a fortune because they judged a book by its worn cover, just as they judged Camille by her quiet nature. The ultimate revenge was not the wealth Camille gained, but the self-respect she reclaimed. We learn that sometimes cutting ties with toxic family is not an act of cruelty, but a necessary act of survival. You must be the appraiser of your own life. If you have ever had to walk away from people who didn't see your worth to build the life you deserve, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to know that being the black sheep just means you are the one chosen to break the cycle. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing you held on to that others tried to make you throw away?